Hey, how's it going, and welcome to the first Fallout New Vegas weekend video. I hope you enjoy your stay. So this is something I've been planning for months and months, maybe even like a few years at this point, but Fallout New Vegas is my favorite Western video game ever made, and it is turning 10 years old on October 19th. So I figured to celebrate, I would pay tribute to it by making a couple of videos. It's going to be a weekend of New Vegas videos, so one today, one throughout the weekend, and then one on Monday the 19th. Despite this being the first New Vegas video, this is actually the one that I weirdly struggled, coming up with a concise topic for. But eventually I figured out just a concise theme for what it is the message I'm trying to get across with this video. And that's longevity in the public eye and why I think New Vegas succeeds at it so well. And I'll start by saying that obviously everything has its own fan base and its own kind of niche that talks about the same thing over and over and over again. You know, if you're into the Souls games, like you talk about Demon Souls and Dark Souls 1 through 3 and Bloodborne over and over and over again. Or if you're into Pokemon, you talk about all the different Pokemon games over and over and over and over again. But every property, every game, every movie, anime, everything that comes out is subject to some form of, attention decay, I guess? I don't know how else to put that. But just kind of the nature of products and, human attention spans. The way it works is something comes out, people play it or watch it, and then it's kind of forgotten about. But part of what I think is so impressive about Fallout New Vegas is that it really doesn't feel like that same level of degradation has occurred to it. Obviously, it's not 2010 anymore. The game's not the hottest new release. It is sort of old news, but I still definitely feel as if just in kind of internet and, video game culture, Fallout New Vegas has managed to achieve this status that very, very, very few games have. Comparing it even to its own sister game in Fallout 3, how often do you really see people actively discuss Fallout 3? Obviously, you'll still see the occasional video about it or somebody mentions it, but it's definitely not quite the same as how New Vegas is treated. New Vegas is subject to all these different video essays about the various factions and the characters, and it just feels as if even though Fallout 3 and, especially Fallout 4 are definitely more popular games, in some weird way, New Vegas has almost outlived them, just in terms of active discussion and memes being made about them, and, it feels like New Vegas has managed to last in people's brains longer. And I don't think it'll blow anybody's mind to give them the revelation that it's probably not the gameplay. I would say it's pretty safe to say that New Vegas's actual gameplay isn't the reason why people keep coming back to it over and over and over. But there's, of course, 100,000 different ways you can make your video game or anime or whatever memorable. This is just kind of a fun thought experiment, but stop and think about, think of a really popular game in your head, or maybe not popular, but something that has a really, really strong following. Some game that's 20 or 30 years old that people still actively talk about and discuss and love, and stop and think why. For some games, you might think, oh, it was so innovative for the time, it was the first, 3D game of its type. Or for some games you might think, oh, it's definitely the characters and the story, it was such an amazing journey that people are still thinking about it all these years later. Or you might think, oh, it's just fucking nostalgia, people played it when they were 5 and they can't get over it. But I would say when it comes to New Vegas, the magical secret when it comes to why this game has lasted as long as it has, and has caused just so much discussion around it, really is the writing. Now, of course, just saying the writing is one of those really catch-all kind of phrases you can just sprinkle in and be like, ooh, looky here, the writing is good. Because the writing can mean so many different things. Are you talking about just character writing, character development? Are you talking about dialogue? Are you talking about plot, lore? Because all of those things kind of fit under the very, very wide umbrella of writing. And I don't know if even Obsidian themselves fully realized this, but when it comes to New Vegas, I think they accidentally wrote one of the most long-lasting, let's discuss this game kinds of games ever made. And I think pretty much all of that revolves around, first of all, the amazing setting of Vegas. But I think more importantly, it's just the characters and the factions of it. If I had to describe New Vegas in just the most broad kind of blanket terminology, I would say it's a game about groups of people. And more importantly, it's a game about groups of people who very much do not agree with each other. And this is just a sneaky little trick for making your work of fiction last in the public eye that New Vegas pretty much taught me. And it's this idea that if there's something written in your game that people are able to disagree about, that helps with its longevity immensely. You know, what are some of the all-time great fictional factions that exist in media? You have, like, the Jedi and the Sith in Star Wars. You have the Federation and Xeon in Gundam. The Alliance and the Horde in Warcraft. And one that's fairly recent that I think really helps to illustrate my point is in Fire Emblem Three Houses, you know, Black Eagles, Blue Lions, Golden Deer. All of these different games and movies and stuff that have these factions that people can attach themselves to tend to end up having a pretty loyal, like, fan base of people who support that particular side. And it just really helps to give that particular work of fiction a lasting presence because, you know, a good game or a shitty game or whatever, it comes out and it's either good or shitty, right? But New Vegas, in a way, managed to, like, obviously people still bring up how it is kind of a buggy mess and how it only kind of sort of functions, but I feel like most of that, especially over the years, the conversation has turned farther and farther away from New Vegas is buggy and more towards, like, would a Mr. House autocracy be good for the Mojave and human society in general? And I think that's part of why New Vegas managed to achieve such a lasting legacy is just the fact that there's so much within it for people to pick apart and discuss. And discussion is obviously very, very different from controversy. When it comes to your game, you probably don't want controversy. I feel like it's always better to have people talk about an idea in your game rather than argue about the quality of it, if that makes sense. And again, I'll compare it to its sister game of Fallout 3. When's the last time you heard somebody have a discussion about something that happened in Fallout 3, right? Or some character or some concept. And I don't mean a discussion in terms of like, oh man, the writing in Fallout 3 is so bad. To me, that's kind of like, that's more just bullying the game in a way. Because Fallout 3 definitely presents itself as a very black or white kind of view of morality, right? The two endings are basically work with the Brotherhood or help the Enclave. Most people would probably agree with the idea that the Brotherhood is at least in Fallout 3, is a good thing, whereas the Enclave probably isn't. Unless you're like some kind of weird Enclave hipster, but, you know, you put 50 people in a room and you ask them, which ending of Fallout 3 do you think is better for the Wasteland? The Brotherhood of Steel, the good ending, or the Enclave ending where you poison the Wasteland? I feel like most people are probably gonna say, yeah, I'll go with the Brotherhood, but, you know, you put 50 people in a room and you ask them, alright, which one do you guys like? The NCR, the Legion, Yes Man, or Mr. House? You're gonna end up with a way greater kind of diversity of thought when it comes to that issue. And I think there is a certain level of immortality when it comes to the kind of themes and conflicts presented in Fallout New Vegas. Because you could go 100 years into the past and ask somebody, oh hey, which one of these ideas do you think is better? A generally good but heavily flawed and bureaucratic like democracy, generally kind of just an authoritarian techno-dictatorship, essentially anarchy, or a unified slave army? And fucking, I don't know, maybe in 100 years we're all plugged into the Matrix, or maybe we're already plugged into the Matrix. That would probably make a lot of sense, but I feel like 100 years from now, we could genuinely still have the same discussion about New Vegas. You know, here we are in 2100, and we're all in these fucking Ghost in the Shell cyber bodies, and we're about to go on our vacation to the moon colony. And we could still ask each other, yeah, but okay, did Caesar have some good points, though? Like, but beyond just the ability to argue and disagree about the factions and whatever else, I think it's just the fact that New Vegas is such a tightly written thing that, at least for me, it's just so pleasant to think about, you know? There's a lot of games where you kind of stop and think like, oh man, the storytelling or the characters or whatever else in this doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But New Vegas is just a generally sensibly written video game. Obviously, you might have your disagreements about Caesar's philosophies or whatever it may be, but the kind of hypocrisies of the Legion are very much intentional. I think there's definitely an enormous difference between writing something in earnest that ends up being shitty, and intentionally writing something that's meant to be kind of hypocritical and thought of as being like a not-so-great idea. But yeah, I could just talk about the storytelling of New Vegas for forever, because there's just so many little interconnecting things about it and shit to think about and talk about. You can form this picture in your head of what every faction would think about every other faction, even if they never really interact. You know, the Great Khans don't have fucking jack shit to do with the Kings, but you can kind of sit there and visualize what a meeting between the two would end up being like. So I definitely do think that's one of the secret tricks to kind of everlasting glory when it comes to your creation, is just having something in it that people can talk about. You know, a central conflict or theme that people can agree or disagree on. And if, you know, 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, people are still talking about it, then I think that's the mark of a successfully executed story. And that's the thing, is that I'm sure 10 years from now, people will still be talking about New Vegas. I sure fucking will be. But yeah, I do think that's part of why New Vegas has managed to last so long. It's just a thing that people talk about, is that it kind of is a centrist wet dream, because none of the factions are really right. And it's kind of just up to you to decide which one is the least wrong, I guess. But yeah, that's been the video. I hope you all enjoyed. Tomorrow will be my video about all the different New Vegas DLC. But yeah, I'll see you guys next time.